A soldier is dying, and no one knows how to save him. It's 2,000 years ago. There are no antibiotics, no clean bandages, no doctor who understands why a small wound turns deadly. The cut on his leg has gone red and hot, and everyone around him has seen where that leads. So his friends do the only thing they know. They reach into a pack, pull out a small papery bulb, crush it into a paste, and press it against the wound. Garlic. That's the medicine, a plant so ordinary that today you can buy a whole bag of it for pocket change and forget it in a kitchen drawer. But for thousands of years, people didn't forget garlic. They depended on it. And here's the strangest part of the whole story. They were never fully sure why it worked. They just knew, somehow, that they trusted it. Different empires trusted it. Different religions trusted it. People who never met, who spoke different languages and lived thousands of miles apart, all reached for the same small plant. This is the real mystery. And it isn't, why does garlic taste good? Why did humanity trust this one plant for 5,000 years, long before anyone could prove it did anything at all? The question is bigger than a vegetable. It's a question about us, about how humans decide what to believe when their lives are on the line. And the answer takes us from a dying soldier, to a plague village, to a laboratory, to a farm so enormous it's hard to picture. Let's begin where the fear began. The world before garlic. To understand why people trusted garlic, you first have to understand how frightened they were. Imagine a world with no hospitals, no pharmacies, no little bottles of pills. There are no refrigerators, so meat rots in a day. There are no supermarkets, so a failed harvest means a hungry winter. And there's no ambulance to call when something goes wrong, because there's no one to call at all. In this world, a small cut is not a small thing. A scrape from a rock, a blister, a wound from a fight. Any of them could turn red, then swollen, then deadly. People watched tiny injuries grow into infections they could not stop. A scratch could kill you, and no one understood why. That's the part that's hard for us to feel today. It wasn't just that people got sick, it's that sickness was invisible. There were no germs, because no one knew germs existed. Illness felt like a curse, or bad air, or bad luck. Something that struck out of nowhere and could not be fought. So imagine living like that. Every day, an unseen enemy could take your child, your parent, or you, and you had no weapon against it. None. Now you understand what ancient people were really searching for. It wasn't flavor, it wasn't luxury. They were searching for control, for anything, any plant, or root, or berry that might give them the smallest bit of power over a world that could kill them without warning. They tasted everything. They watched what helped and what hurt. They remembered, and passed the knowledge down through hundreds of years. Slowly, painfully, one funeral at a time, humanity built an invisible library of plants that seemed to keep people alive. Without knowing it, they were hunting for something very specific, something tough, something that lasted. Something that could travel without spoiling, that could be grown by anyone, and that seemed to fight back against the unseen enemy. It was, in other words, something like garlic. And in the wild hills of Central Asia, that plant was already waiting. The plant nobody expected. Here's the funny thing. If you were an ancient person walking past wild garlic, you'd probably ignore it. It wasn't sweet like a berry. It wasn't colorful like a flower. It grew in rocky, stubborn ground, where softer plants gave up, and the moment you crushed it, it hit you with a smell so sharp it made your eyes sting. In nature, that smell is usually a warning. Bitter means, don't eat me. Strong means, stay away. Most animals leave garlic alone for exactly that reason. The smell is the plant's shield. But somebody, thousands of years ago, ignored the warning. Somebody crushed a clove, breathed in that eye-watering scent, and ate it anyway. Instead of getting sick, they felt fine. Maybe even good. The plant was harsh, yes, but it was also hardy, easy to grow, and it kept for a long time without rotting. In a world where food spoiled in days, a plant that lasted was almost magic. So they planted more. And this is where garlic and humans made a quiet deal that would last 5,000 years. Because garlic, the kind we eat, barely spreads on its own. It survives because we plant it, clove by clove, season after season, generation after generation. We agreed to carry it through history. In return, it gave us something we believed we couldn't live without. But think about what people put up with to keep that deal. The breath. Ancient people were not fools. They knew exactly what garlic did to your breath. They joked about it. Some cultures looked down on garlic eaters as low class. There were kings and priests who wanted nothing to do with the smell. In some places, eating it before entering a temple was actually forbidden. People ate it anyway. For thousands of years. Every single day. Stop and let that sink in, because it's your first clue to the big question. Humans are picky. We avoid things that smell bad. We chase things that taste sweet. And yet, with garlic, millions of people across the world chose the smelly, stinging plant over and over, because whatever it gave them was worth the price. That tells you something about human trust. We don't trust what's pretty. We trust what shows up. The thing that's there in the hard times, that lasts the journey, that never seems to fail us. Garlic was never the sweetest plant. It was the most dependable. And dependability, it turns out, was about to win garlic a place in the most powerful institution of the ancient world, the army. The plant that fed armies. A fact that sounds strange until you think like a general. An army doesn't march on its courage, it marches on its stomach. Move 10,000 soldiers across a continent, and the hardest problem isn't the enemy, it's food. What do you feed them? How do you carry it? How do you keep it from rotting before you arrive? Lose that problem, and your army starves before it ever reaches the battle. Now look at garlic through a general's eyes. It's small and light. It doesn't spoil for weeks or months. It survives heat, travel, and rough handling. It's cheap enough to feed thousands, and the soldiers believe it keeps them strong and healthy on the road. For a commander far from home, that's not a vegetable. That's a supply line weapon. That's why garlic shows up, again and again, wherever armies and hard labor appear. Start in ancient Egypt. Garlic was food for the working people, the farmers and laborers who did the brutal jobs under a punishing sun. There's a famous old story that an inscription on the Great Pyramid recorded a fortune spent on garlic and onions to feed the builders. But we have to be honest, because honesty is the whole point of this story. That tale comes from a Greek traveler named Herodotus, and he didn't read the inscription himself. A guide told him what it said, and that guide may have been fooling a gullible tourist. Modern historians doubt the story, so we can't say garlic built the pyramids. What we can prove is this. Garlic appears in a real Egyptian medical text written more than 3,000 years ago, listed among the remedies people relied on. Egyptians grew it, ate it, and valued it. That part is rock solid. Now travel to Greece. Here garlic became the fuel of strength. Greek athletes, the stories say, ate garlic before their contests, believing it gave them extra power. Did it actually make them faster? We honestly don't know. There were no stopwatches, no tests. But they believed, and the belief alone put garlic in the hands of the strongest men in Greece. Then came Rome, and this is where garlic truly went to war. The Romans linked garlic to Mars, their god of war. Their great writers filled pages with it. One famous Roman encyclopedia listed dozens of garlic cures for everything from coughs to snake bites. Roman doctors recommended it to anyone doing hard physical work. And when the legions marched out to conquer the world, garlic marched with them. Picture one of those legionaries. We'll never know his name. History almost never remembers the ordinary ones. He's been walking for days under a heavy pack. His feet are blistered. His food is running low. His home is 1,000 miles behind him. At the end of the day, the fires are lit, and he reaches into his rations for something plain. He rubs a raw clove onto hard bread and eats it, wincing at the sharp bite. It's not a feast, but in that moment, that little clove is more than food. It's a scrap of home he can carry in his pack. It's the belief, right or wrong, that this small, tough plant is helping his tired body last one more march. Now multiply that soldier by the tens of thousands, across an empire that stretched 3 continents, and you start to see the scale of garlic's quiet job. This next part the history books rush past, but it's huge. As Rome conquered, Rome planted. The legions carried their foods into every new land they took, and garlic was one of them. So garlic didn't just feed the army became garlic's delivery system, pressing it into the soil of Europe, spreading it across an entire empire, one conquest at a time. And it wasn't only soldiers moving it. Traders carried garlic along the great routes that stitched the world together. The desert roads and caravan trails where a merchant might travel for months. Out on the trail, the water is rationed, the sun hammers down, and most fresh food would rot to slime before the next city ever appeared on the horizon. But garlic doesn't rot. Garlic makes the journey, so it became one of the quiet passengers of world trade, riding into China, India, and beyond, on the backs of camels and the decks of ships, carried by people who refuse to travel without it. Do you see what's happening? Garlic is no longer just a plant. It's moving with the two great forces that shaped the ancient world, armies and trade. Wherever power went, garlic went. Wherever people pushed into the unknown, they packed garlic for the road. The title of this story is The Plant That Fed Armies. But it's bigger than that. Garlic didn't just feed armies. It traveled the world inside them. And then, one day, the world faced an enemy that no army could fight. And people turned to garlic not for strength, but for survival. The plant and the plague. Imagine a village, 600 years ago, in the grip of the Black Death. The plague is killing so fast that the living can't bury the dead. Whole families vanish in a week. Nobody knows what causes it. Not germs, not fleas, nothing. To the people living through it, death is simply moving through the air, invisible and unstoppable, taking whoever it touches. Now picture one family inside a small stone house, terrified, listening to the silence where their neighbors used to be. What do? They can't fight what they can't see. They have no medicine that works, so they reach for the one thing their grandparents swore by, the one thing that has meant protection for as long as anyone can remember. Garlic. They hang it in the doorway, they press it to their faces, they eat it, wear it, stuff it into every corner of the house, not because they have proof, but because it's all they have. In the middle of the worst horror imaginable, that little bulb is the thin line between them and the dark. This is the emotional heart of the whole story, so let's not look away from it. There's an old legend about a band of thieves who robbed plague victims and survived by soaking themselves in a garlic and vinegar brew. Historians argue about whether it ever happened. There are tales of plague doctors in their eerie beaked masks, the long beaks sometimes packed with strong-smelling herbs, and in some tellings garlic, because people believed foul air carried the disease and that a powerful smell could hold it back. Some of these stories are true, some are legend, some are a blur of both. But every one of them points at the same haunting fact. When death itself came knocking, garlic was what humans reached for. Not gold, not weapons, a plant. And here we have to be truthful, the way we've tried to be all along. Garlic did not stop the Black Death. It couldn't. Nothing they had could. The plague burned through Europe and killed tens of millions no matter what anyone hung in their doorway. Those desperate villagers were putting their faith in something that could not save them from that. So were they simply wrong? Foolish? Were 5,000 years of trust just a comforting lie people told themselves in the dark? That's what almost everyone assumed for centuries afterward. Garlic was a folk belief, a superstition, an old wives' tale you smiled at politely, until a man looked through a lens and saw something no human had ever seen before. The man who saw why for 5,000 years, humanity trusted garlic completely, and blindly. They had no idea what it actually did, or whether it did anything at all. It was pure faith, handed down across 100 generations, parent to child to grandchild, in an unbroken chain. Then, finally, someone found a way to look. The story goes that in the year 1858, in France, the great scientist Louis Pasteur put garlic to the test. Pasteur was one of the first people on Earth to truly understand that tiny living things, germs, cause disease. For the first time in history, someone could actually see the invisible enemy that had terrified humans since the beginning. And, so the story goes, when Pasteur exposed bacteria to garlic, the bacteria died. Now, here's a detail that's almost too perfect. This famous Pasteur story gets repeated in books and articles everywhere, but when scholars go hunting for the original record of it, they can't quite find it. Even this moment, fittingly for garlic, may be part legend, another story that grew taller with each retelling. But the truth underneath it is real, and you can prove it in a lab today. Crushed garlic really does kill certain bacteria. That's not folklore, that's chemistry. The thing those terrified villagers sensed, without any way to understand it, was actually there all along. History then handed us the proof in the clearest, cruelest way possible, on the battlefield. Go back to that dying soldier from the very start of our story. For most of history, a wound like his was a death sentence, because there was nothing to fight the infection eating him alive. But in the world wars of the 20th century, in an age of modern hospitals and modern doctors, the miracle medicines sometimes ran out. And when they did, doctors and soldiers went back to the old plant. They packed garlic onto open wounds to hold off infection, It worked well enough that it earned a nickname that says everything: Russian penicillin. Go back one more time to that idea. In the modern world, when the newest drugs were gone, humanity reached back across 5,000 years and grabbed garlic, the same plant the Egyptian laborer ate under the sun, the same plant the Roman soldier rubbed on his bread, the same plant the plague family hung in the doorway. It was still there, still working, when everything else had failed. And in 1944, scientists finally caught the culprit red-handed. They pinned down the exact substance in garlic that kills germs and gave it a name: allicin. After 5,000 years, the invisible thing hiding inside the clove finally had one. This is the great turning point of the entire story, the moment faith met proof. Because here's what it reveals about the question we started with. Humanity trusted garlic for 5,000 years before anyone could explain it, and it turns out they weren't crazy. Generations of ordinary people, with no microscopes, no germ theory, no proof of any kind, somehow figured out that this plant mattered, and clung to that belief across thousands of years, until science finally caught up and quietly admitted, you were right. Their instinct had run ahead of their knowledge by 50 whole centuries. But we have to stay honest, so hold on to this too, because it matters just as much. Being right about something is not being right about everything. Garlic never was the all-powerful miracle the legends claimed. We'll come back to exactly what the science does and doesn't say. First, we have to understand who kept this belief burning for all those centuries, and the answer isn't kings. The plant of ordinary people. A truth that's easy to miss. Garlic was never a treasure of the rich. Think about the other famous plants of history. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and saffron were treasures, carried across the world at enormous cost. They were so precious that people were sometimes paid in them, and for most of history they lived only in the kitchens of the wealthy, locked away like jewels. Garlic was the opposite. It was cheap. It was easy. You didn't need to be rich to grow it. A poor family with a scrap of dirt could plant a few cloves and grow their own supply. Farmers grew it. Builders ate it. Travelers packed it. Ordinary families kept it in the cupboard, generation after generation, in every corner of the world. It spread further than any luxury spice ever could, and that's exactly why. A treasure only reaches the people who can afford it. But a plant that anyone can grow reaches everyone. So while kings and merchants fought over rare spices, garlic quietly did something more powerful. It slipped into the daily life of the common people, and stayed there for thousands of years, uninvited and unstoppable. Step into a poor home, hundreds of years ago. Not much money. The meals are plain. Bread, beans, whatever grows in the dirt out back. But there's always garlic. It turns barely enough to survive into something that actually tastes good. It's the reliable friend in the cupboard, the flavor that made hard lives a little warmer, the small daily comfort that cost almost nothing. Now here's the perspective shift that changes how you see history itself. When we tell the story of the past, we usually tell the story of the powerful, kings and queens, gold and palaces, the rare and expensive things locked behind stone walls. When you look closer, though, some of the objects that shaped human civilization the most were never rare at all. They were the humble things, the cheap things, the things that belonged to the farmer, the traveler, and the tired family at the end of a long day. Those things touched more lives than any crown ever did, because they belonged to everyone, everywhere, all at once. That is garlic, one of those humble things. It didn't shape history from the top down, through kings and armies alone. It shaped it from the bottom up, through billions of ordinary people who trusted it, planted it, cooked with it, and passed it to their children like a secret worth keeping. And because it lived so deep inside everyday life, it worked its way into something beyond food and medicine. It slipped into people's fears, their prayers, and their darkest stories. When garlic became a symbol, remember those plague families hanging garlic in the doorway. Over the centuries, that desperate habit hardened into something bigger. Garlic stopped being just a plant you ate to feel safe. It became a thing you used to feel safe, a shield you could hang on a wall. And when a plant makes people feel protected for long enough, it becomes a symbol of protection itself. In cultures all over the world, people came to believe garlic could guard against evil. They hung it above doors. They wore it around their necks. They tucked it into corners to keep away bad luck, curses, and dark spirits. The logic underneath was simple and deeply human. If garlic protects the body from unseen sickness, maybe it can protect the soul from unseen evil too. Different lands had their own versions, but one of them grew into the most famous superstition on the entire planet: vampires. Somewhere in the folklore of Eastern Europe, garlic became the classic weapon against the undead. Hang it on your window, wear it around your neck, and the monster couldn't reach you. Where did that come from? No one's completely certain, but look closely and you can see the old belief hiding inside it. For centuries, garlic had meant protection from sickness and death. Vampires were imagined as creatures of death and disease. So of course the plant that fought illness would fight the monster. The ancient belief simply pulled on a new, spookier costume. Then, a little over 100 years ago, a writer named Bram Stoker put garlic into a famous vampire novel. In the story, garlic is used again and again to hold the vampire back. The book became a sensation. Then came the movies, and more movies, and cartoons, and costumes. And that's how a piece of quiet village folklore turned into something almost every person alive now knows by heart. Look at the whole journey. A stubborn weed on a rocky hillside became food. Then it became medicine. Then it became a shield against the greatest plague in history. And then it became a movie monster weapon recognized on every continent on Earth. One small plant traveled all the way from the dinner plate into the human imagination and set up camp there forever. But while garlic was busy becoming a legend, it was also quietly conquering the real world. And the true scale of that conquest is almost impossible to believe. The modern clove. So what happened to that wild little survivor in the modern age? It didn't fade. It took over the planet. Today, garlic is one of the most grown vegetables on Earth. Every single year, the world produces around 29 million tons of it. Try to picture that, tens of billions of bulbs, harvested every year, on farms spread across dozens of countries, more garlic than every human alive could eat by hand in a lifetime. One number stops you cold. A single country grows most of it. China produces roughly 3/4 of all the garlic on the entire planet, more than every other country on Earth combined. There's a place in China sometimes called the garlic capital of the world, where the plant is grown, sorted, and shipped on a scale so vast it's hard to hold in your head. After China, countries like India grow enormous amounts too, and even faraway California has its own busy garlic farms. All told, garlic is a global crop worth billions and billions of dollars every year. Remember where this plant started. A weed. A wild bulb in the rocky hills of Central Asia that most animals wouldn't even touch, and now it feeds the entire world by the tens of millions of tons. The tough little survivor didn't just win, it won everything. But the modern age didn't just grow more garlic. It finally cracked garlic's oldest mystery, the smell. For thousands of years, people knew garlic was pungent, but nobody understood why. Here's the beautiful answer. A whole clove, sitting quietly in your hand, barely smells at all. Because the smell isn't sitting there, ready-made, waiting. It has to be created. Inside every clove, there are two ingredients kept apart, locked in separate compartments. Like a match, and its strikers stored in different drawers. On their own, they do absolutely nothing. But the instant you crush, chop, or bite the clove, you shatter the walls between them. The two ingredients rush together. A tiny chemical reaction fires off in a fraction of a second, and that reaction creates the sharp, unmistakable smell of fresh garlic, along with allicin, the germ-killing substance we met on those wartime battlefields. Isn't that wonderful? Garlic isn't smelly until you damage it. Crushing it is what wakes it up. In the wild, that reaction is the plant's self-defense, a chemical weapon it fires only when something bites into it. So every time you smash a clove for dinner, you're setting off garlic's ancient alarm system. You're not cooking, you're triggering a 5,000-year-old defense mechanism, right there on your cutting board. That same chemistry explains humanity's oldest complaint. When you eat garlic, some of those compounds are absorbed into your body and eventually leave through your lungs. Which means garlic breath doesn't only come from your mouth, it rises up from inside you, on your very breath, for hours after the meal is long gone. That's why brushing your teeth never fully fixes it. You're not just tasting garlic, you're breathing it out. Now, the honest ending, the part that matters most. We know garlic kills some germs in a laboratory dish. So does it live up to all those ancient health claims? Here, modern science gives us a careful, grown-up answer. Not a cheer and not a laugh. Researchers have tested garlic in real studies on real people, and the results are genuinely mixed. Some studies suggest garlic might slightly lower cholesterol or nudge blood pressure down a little in certain people. Others find little or no effect at all. When scientists gather all the research together and look at the whole picture, what emerges is modest and honest. Garlic may offer small health benefits for some people, but it is not a powerful drug, and it is definitely not a cure for serious disease. So let's be clear and fair, the way we've tried to be from the very first minute. Garlic is a healthy, genuinely interesting food. It contains real compounds that really do things. Eating it is a good idea, but it will not cure illness, and the grandest ancient claims about it were always far bigger than the truth. The honest verdict is a gentle one. Not a miracle, not a myth. Something in between. A good, useful plant that humanity happened to trust a little more than it deserved, and yet not entirely without reason. And here's the beautiful part. Even now that the mystery is solved and the magic is explained, garlic hasn't lost its place at all. People still crush it into nearly every kind of cooking on the planet. It flavors bread and pasta sauce and stir-fries and soups in billions of kitchens tonight. It's sold as pills in every pharmacy. There are entire festivals drawing huge crowds dedicated to celebrating it. Thousands of years after that first brave person crushed a wild clove and decided to eat it anyway, we are still growing garlic, still cooking with it, still complaining about the breath, and still keeping it close. The story never ended. It's happening in your house, right now. Conclusion. So let's go back to where we started. A kitchen, an ordinary evening, someone reaches into a bowl, pulls out a small bulb, peels away the papery skin, and presses down on a single clove. Crush. The smell fills the room. Sharp, familiar, instant. To the person cooking, it's nothing special, just an ingredient, just one small step before dinner. But you know better now. Hidden inside that tiny crushed clove is a story 5,000 years long. There are the ancient workers of Egypt, eating it under the desert sun. There are the Greek athletes who believed it made them strong. There's that one tired Roman soldier, far from home, chewing garlic at the edge of an empire he'll never see the end of. There are the caravans crossing the desert with garlic in the packs. There are the healers of Greece and China and India. There are the terrified plague families, hanging it in their doorways against the dark. There are the villagers who believed it could hold back monsters. There are the wartime doctors, pressing Russian penicillin onto wounds when everything modern had failed. All of it, the marching, the healing, the hoping, the surviving, is folded into one small clove. And here, at last, is the answer to the question we started with. Why did humanity trust this plant for 5,000 years? Not because it was a miracle. It wasn't. Not because they understood it. They didn't, for almost the entire story. They trusted it because, in a world that could kill you without warning, garlic was the one thing that never let them down. It was cheap when they were poor. It lasted when everything else spoiled. It was there when they were afraid. And every so often, enough times to matter, it seemed to actually help. Not really a story about a plant at all, then. It's about people. Billions of ordinary people, across thousands of years, quietly deciding what to trust when their lives were on the line. And somehow, without ever knowing why, they got it mostly right. So the next time you crush a clove of garlic and that smell rises up around you, remember what you're really holding. That tiny clove has been helping humans for 5,000 years, and it's not done yet.